What I do want to talk to you guys about is physical activity in children, taking a slightly different tack to Eleanor. I wanted this last session to be hopefully just some quite practical information for you guys, a little bit of a challenge for you towards the end of the day, I hope, having a little think about what you may be able to do in this realm. What we'll go through is how physically active do we want children to be. I'll then explain how physically active children are, all children in Australia, and as well as children with CF. Why I want you to take some sort of interest in this or care about it at all. And finally, the challenge will come with how might you possibly go about making some sort of change in this area. Before we set off, people just may be a little bit confused, or you may not be, about what I may be referring to as physical activity. So I don't want you to be thinking about exercise. You sit here listening to what I have to say. I won't read out these definitions, but think of physical activity as something that gets children moving. Okay, they use their body, their breathing becomes a little bit harder, and their hearts beat a bit faster. There's different levels of physical activity, which we'll talk about a little bit in the talk, but try to differentiate that from exercise, which is generally accepted as something structured with a goal, some sort of repetitive 3 times a week for a certain duration that you're trying to achieve something. Sedentary behaviour, sitting or reclined sitting or lying down, except for when sleeping, and we'll talk about the impacts of screen time on how much sedentary behaviour you may participate in. Now, I'm going to fly through these. Holding up in my hand here are the Australian government's recommendations for physical activity and sedentary behaviour in all children. There's some for adults as well, which exist, and some for families. I've got copies of them available at the back, because I'll refer to them a bit later, and it'd be great if you could pick one up on your way out. Without going too much into the details of what's in all the different age groups, there'll be the information on the slides behind me as I go through, and you'll also have hopefully the opportunity to pick one up and have a little read if you're not aware of their existence. In babies, main message I want to give or to sort of keep in mind is unrestricted sort of floor play is important for both development and just using their bodies. Toddlers and preschoolers, the recommendation for them is at least 3 hours of active play per day. As you obviously we talk about sedentary behaviour or screen time, so the controversial aspect of this that came out was how much screen time should little ones have, and the current recommendation is no screen time for children less than 2 years of age, nothing at all, which is a challenge in itself, and not entirely realistic in some circumstances. Children 2 to 5 having 1 hour or less of screen time per day. I'm just going to state these, throw them out there, and we'll get into what is actually happening a bit later. As we move through the age groups a wee bit, the physical activity recommendation drops down to what we call 60 minutes of moderate or vigorous physical activity. And this outside of school times. Quite often when I ask people, they're like, oh yeah, my child, they'll run around at recess, they'll run around at lunchtime. That's not what the sort of guidelines are referring to. We're thinking of how might we be able to add to that by 60 minutes per day, and just mixing up those activities. So a few days a week you're engaging in different style of activity that's engaging different body systems. Sedentary behaviour, the allowance goes up to 2 hours. Nothing really changes in the adolescent group and the teenage group. I've listed up there what you might sort of think of as moderate or vigorous physical activity. So this the common sort of perception of moderate intensity activity, maybe going for a brisk walk, being able to participate in that activity and still be able to hold quite a normal conversation. Vigorous is it is more a bit more effort required, and you are getting more puffed out with that sort of thing. The screen time remains the same. Now, realistically, what is happening? This exists, as do many other devices. So the good thing I can tell you is that because often in dealing with people with CF and families with CF, children with CF, we make recommendations based on a paucity of data in some circumstances. In one way, CF is an area where we're really quite fortunate compared to other diseases, respiratory and non-respiratory diseases, where there just seems to be an enormous drive for research and information gathering, which is fantastic, and it's a great area as a health professional to work in. As we extend that out to a national sort of issue of obesity and inactivity, then the access to data we get is just exponentially multiplied. So there's lots of good data sources we have about how active are children in Australia. I'm purposely not focusing, there'll be a little bit on CF, I'm purposely not focusing on CF specific information and data because for the most part I am pitching my talk to parents of children with CF here. For the most part, what a physiotherapist or as a health professional team I'd like to think we're trying to convey as a message to you guys is that we want your child to be a normally active child, no different to their peers, at least from a physical activity point of view, and hopefully in the vast majority of their sort of aspects of their lifestyle. So the recommendations I'm going to focus on today and data I'm going to give you is about what normal children in Australia partake in. Okay, 2 to 5 year olds, not really an issue in this group. The only preschool sort of age children who don't meet the recommendations that I come across are where it's almost like you have to purposely go out of your way to prevent them being active. You put a toddler in the right environment, a preschool age person in the right environment, that involves outdoor time. Outdoor time's quite closely linked to how much activity they do, even your indoor time and the access to screen time. If that's appropriately monitored, then we don't have issues in that age group, not just in CF, but across the board in Australia, doing pretty well. As we age through childhood, it does become quite a significant issue. So we go from preschoolers exceeding activity recommendations to the age groups up from that not doing so well at all. So 25 to 50% actually meet them, so that's not a very impressive number for a country that prides itself on being physically active. The big marked difference, and where you see sort of that 50% is more based on your primary school age children, the big demarcation is once we get to sort of pre-adolescence and adolescence, there's a rapid decline in participation. It's most marked in girls. Opting out of organised sports, one reason. There's many factors that drive this, and I'm not going to go into the factors. I'd like to sort of maybe just promote some ideas to how we might overcome it towards the end. But be aware, one real key, and one thing I really want you guys to think about is look at those sort of key times in childhood development, particularly around the end of primary school years. Pre-planning and preparing for that, and thinking about strategies within your family and within the health professionals in the school around you that may be able to overcome that will become really important. We'll skip over the data bits, but screen time reality we'll continue on with. So how do we go as Australians in our screen time behaviours? 2 to 5 year olds, not too far off the mark in terms of the recommendation, 60 minutes, about 83 minutes. My feeling is in these surveys that everyone will probably underreport their actual screen time use, as we all would if we were asked. And so these are probably conservative estimations. Some starting to have screens in their rooms. As you go up the age groups, again, you're seeing a pattern here of increasing use of time and reliance on passive forms of entertainment and less on active forms of entertainment. Okay, so one thing to point out is just look at the link between having a screen in the room and physical activity levels and screen usage. Now, parents, and again, apologies if you're not a parent of a child with CF or a carer, mainly pitching to the group, but I'm hoping others can take a little bit of a message. So most of us don't know that the guidelines exist, the ones I just floated around, and 40% have no sort of regulations within their household about electronic media usage. I don't think this is any accident. I think it is generational, and I think it is that parenting via sort of osmosis didn't teach us any of this. We can all reflect on childhoods of different ways of entertaining ourselves as opposed to having access to tablets and handheld devices. Television was available for most of us, but it is a challenge for our generation. How do we overcome this cycle and actually meet sort of particularly screen time recommendations and screen time behaviours in our children? How do we manage them? Okay, I'm going to keep on about parents. So things that have been shown that have been helpful, and again we have the advantage. One disadvantage, one sort of disappointing aspect is I can sort of hand these out and I can tell you all sort of things about the benefits of activity, and you can be all really well educated by the end of this short little 20-minute talk about what is ideal and what leads to better health outcomes and what aspects of screen time are a bit damaging. But does it lead to behaviour change? It doesn't lead to behaviour change, unfortunately. We can know lots and we can do little, but things that have been shown to actually have some sort of positive impact. So logistics support is actually helping your children get places, organising things on their behalf. That does help. Modelling is sort of being more active yourself, particularly in dads, has been shown to be a bit more useful. Just simply the amount of time spent outdoors without any actual direction about what you do outdoors, but encouraging your children to be outdoors. The link between parent activities and children's activities isn't that strong. It exists even right down to sort of preschool age. Some of you might be reassured to hear that it isn't up to you to go out and exercise to make your child more active. There are links there, but it's not as strong as one would think. But the strongest sort of link between what we're talking about is more around just sort of sedentary time, and certainly parents' sedentary time and television watching in particular, and has been shown to have quite a strong link to sedentary behaviour in their children, a stronger link than what physical activity does on the other end of the coin. Now I'll just spend 2 slides talking about CF. I'm not going to talk a lot about how active are children with CF because often this isn't based on large sort of data sets, and there's a bit of a mixed opinion out there, but I can probably say it's fairly well accepted that children with CF are less active than their peers and have sort of a lower exercise capacity, and there's factors there that are sort of logical factors and reasons why that may exist. But as I said earlier, as our treatments improve, and I'm sure a lot of you are happy to be raising children that you'd consider as being quite normal and not having these barriers to being equally active to other children their same age. Why should you care? So we've known for quite a while about exercise, and Nettle highlighted some of the exercise benefits in CF and some of the nice positive reasons why everyone should be exercising. It's taken a little while for physical activity to get a bit of the spotlight, but recent research truly does suggest that there are a number of reasons why just increased physical activity levels, so not that structured, regimented sort of exercise, supervised or unsupervised sessions, are important. Just children being more physically active, having links between that and more stable lung function, less admissions to hospital, and improved thoracic postures, which become important throughout the life. Okay, now the question is the how and the time to think a bit. And I really do want to challenge everyone out there today to think, okay, is this something in the care of my child with CF that I could actually do something about? It's always slightly frustrating that, after a CF conference, parents will come back to me and they'll tell me, this wonderful bit of information another physio gave them, and they're going to do this and this. Makes me feel slightly inadequate, even if I've told them the same thing 5 times before, but often I haven't. But I want you to be able to go back to your clinic, in coming weeks or months and say you met this brilliant physio at the lay conference and they gave you this message and this is what you're going to do about it. Because it is about doing. This is somewhere where I do throw it over to you. Have a good think about what, if any, of this may actually apply to you. So there's things about examples. So you can just, again, read what's behind him as I speak, because I do want to finish up in a couple of minutes. This is more about modelling and what you can do to sort of help your child or instill some more activity in that day-to-day. Just simple, sort of straightforward examples. Screen time, I do think, is a big one. This certainly hasn't attracted any attention in the CF research yet, or that whole sedentary behaviour sort of side of it. But little suggestions. They're not rocket science. You may have some in place, you may not. You may have no boundaries whatsoever around electronic media use in your household, and that would certainly be at the top of the list as a challenge to go home with from today. Different ways to encourage being physical active. This is more the logistic support I'm talking about, so getting children there, encouraging them when they're doing, making their efforts, finding them, asking them, honing on what their sort of wants and their interests are. Giving gifts that encourage physical activity, I think, is a wonderful idea, not just to your children, but your children's friends. Having birthday parties that are physical activity themed, as opposed to going to the movies. Just all little things you may be able to add in. Partnering with your child's school and sort of community-based interventions is certainly, out of the evidence at least, the clearest way to actually achieve a positive change. So where many schools are going away, particularly in later secondary years, so it's almost universal that kids in year 11 and 12 don't have regular school sport anymore, and that's a real disappointment. The other end of the spectrum, which happens in about 5% of New South Wales schools, is daily structured physical activity, more in primary schools than high schools. But what are your school doing? Because the most meaningful way, as I said, to get increase in physical activity levels are to do it through schools and community sort of initiatives. So be active, be a voice in your school. If you're on the PNC, find out what's happening, write a letter. There's small things you can do. Your CF organisation, Eleanor mentioned the Nuffield, which is a gym chain in the UK, having people with CF being able to use that. We're almost there, at least in New South Wales, with just this year, Fitness First coming into some partnership. And I'm not going to go through all these because it will take too long and it's not relevant to everybody in the room, but have a look up there, see if your state organisation is up there. There are certainly opportunities for your state organisation to help encourage physical activity. I'm so pleased some of the state organisations are very active in this area. And so ask your state representative, ask your contact at your local state CF service, what's available to me to help encourage physical activity. And pretty much every state, if not every state, has something to help in that way. So ask the question, and hopefully you'll get a positive answer. I say, think of one thing. These I've just pulled straight out of here. We're not going to talk through them. There's lots of things. It's looking at your lifestyle, your day-to-day runnings, thinking where is that 10 or 15 minutes I can add in? Can I use some sort of active transport to school, active transport away from school, or to the shops for that matter? What sort of things are my kids' friends interested in? Does my kid have any interest in that? There's lots. So just have a go. Get out there. I'd really love to see some sort of active message taken home. Think of one thing. That's your challenge from today. Think of one thing. At your next appointment at your CF clinic, talk to your physio. I'm going to email all the physios and say, the parents at the lay program were asked to give you one thing that they're going to change from today. See how many of you take it up. Public health is great. As I welcome Nigel back up onto the stage to talk about questions. If you remember
this man is walking. It's not very hard. Just watch him for a while and you'll get the idea. Walking can be done at home, in the street, in the country. You can walk through the park or walk along the beach. You can walk at lunchtime, at nighttime. Walk the dog. Go for a walk with the family. Take something to play with while you're walking. Walking makes you feel better. And best of all, walking is free. Try it today. Here's a simple walk to start with. Stand up, walk over here, and turn off the telly. And then go for a walk outside. Go on. We'll still be here when you get back.
Hopefully some of you remember Norm and the Life Be In It campaign. But great message, and take on the challenge, please.